What's up, Eco Hackers? Welcome to the Cutting Edge Podcast. I'm your host, C.S. Joseph, and this is Cutting Edge episode for July 2021. We do this podcast about once a month, and we talk about cutting edge issues and a bunch of different things going on within the science or psychology, etc., as we continue our path to empiricism and practical application. Before I begin today's show, I would like to remind everyone you have access to UCHA. You can find that at https:// www.udja.app or .app. But slowly but surely you could see during the alpha test that the application is morphing and becoming something more as it grows. This particular cutting edge podcast, we're actually going to be lightly discussing professional compatibility and kind of what it means and why it's actually important. A lot of people don't really see professional compatibility as something that they should care about. But when you're in corporate America or you're in organizations or you're trying to get work done, professional compatibility goes a long way, especially if you're in a management position, especially if you are trying to build the best team for a certain goal. Maybe it's a temporary team like a project team, or maybe it's your team for a certain department within your organization, etc. Or it could be something as simple as Walmart, or it could be something as complex as the sales team for Bank of America. It doesn't matter. The psychology permeates every single aspect of human life as we know it, and as a result, it's very important that we consider, like some of the issues and the warnings that go in there. And a lot of people make the mistake. They seriously make the mistake of like, oh, well, if I'm really compatible with this person, I should hire them. Or, oh, if I'm really compatible with this person, it'll be easy to manage them. Or oh, I'm really glad that my manager is an INTJ, even though I'm an ENTP, etc. Oftentimes, people think that that's a good thing in a work environment. And I'm here to say that it is not a good thing. It is not a good thing at all. Because this leads to professional codependence. This leads to enabling on people when it comes to getting work done, and it absolutely kills productivity. One of the examples with which it can kill productivity is like, so for example, you get on a team, you have one pragmatic person, but you have the rest of the team as affiliative, and they're all forcing the pragmatic person to work as a group. And you hire the pragmatic person because you know they're insanely talented, but their talent level ends up being normalized or reduced because they're working in a very interdependent affiliative group setting for the project or the department that they're in. And that can cause a lot of problems. And that means as you, the business owner, are not getting return on investment for that person because the rest of your team is inhibiting that person from being productive to begin with. And these are very important nuances and things that need to be considered if you're going to be a business owner, or if you're a manager or a supervisor or a team leader or a project lead or project manager or decision maker of some kind within a business or an organization. Could even be a nonprofit. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. All of these things come into play. And yes, Lorenzo, it can definitely lead into sandbagging. Absolutely, it can lead into sandbagging. So professional compatibility needs to be considered as something that should be ultimately leading business owners or hiring managers or project managers or leaders, we'll say, with any business or organization. Because if it's not a consideration, you're going to end up, as Lorenzo said, you have sandbaggers, but it's actually going to contribute to chaos. Or, quite frankly, you're going to have no productivity or lower productivity. The standard of productivity is actually going to go down. It's not actually going to go up. Most people think that if you hire for compatibility, the standard productivity is going to go up. No, it's not. It's actually going to go down. And the reason why is because compatibility or cognitive synchronicity does not provide enough challenge to people or individuals. And this causes them to be ultimately enabled, which leads people to behave entitled in the workplace. And entitlement in the workplace, this is where you get the people who are they actually work for 1 hour, but they charge you for 3. And this is heavily talked about in the book, The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, who also is an ENTP, for example. I really am a huge fan of his work, especially the 4-Hour Body that helped me start my fitness journey where it is now. And I really learned a lot about that. But the bottom line is that if you don't have some kind of challenge built in to your productivity team, and it doesn't necessarily have to be challenge from a management level to someone beneath you from a management level. This is actually a level of challenge that should even be at your level, people under you, people above you, because at the end of the day, being sharp and strong as an individual who is to overcome obstacles and overcome challenges in the workplace is actually what will make people ultimately more productive. The other thing is that it allows there to be competing perspectives, and those competing perspectives prevents the concept of having yes men. Imagine running a company and being surrounded by yes men and having this huge echo chamber within your boardroom, and then you're incapable of making any good or well thought out decisions for your business because, oh crap, they're all agreeing with me by default instead of actually offering me challenge. And because there's a serious lack of challenge there, no one's actually able to get any meaningful work done. And that's a huge problem. It's not something that I would recommend anyone do for their organization or anything thereof. So with that being said, you don't want that echo chamber. You don't want to be surrounded with yes men in an organization. It's just not something that's going to be useful to you or the organization itself, especially if you're in a leadership position. But even more, like, say if you're not in a leadership position, do you really want to be part of the problem? Do you really want to be contributing to the decision makers having the echo chamber or being ignorant, etc.? And due to that ignorance, they're actually leading the company into the ditch, right? And when that happens, you yourself don't even have a job. You don't even have a future at that moment in time. I have been in professional situations in the past where it was looking like the doors of the business were going to be closed 2 weeks later if we didn't act now. And that happened when I was working for Adventist Health. We had an air conditioner fail at 3 a.m. We didn't have any backups or disaster recovery because upper management at this hospital under Adventist Health didn't see it necessary. And it's because they maintained that information technology department was not a revenue generating department. So we got a lot less funding. We didn't really, the board of directors didn't really care about what we were doing. And yet we had a catastrophic failure in the data center. The data center overheated because it has to be cooled consistently. And we lost all of our data. And, for example, there's a man who's having open heart surgery and they couldn't even bring up the images and he was going to die. And we, as engineers, had to get those images back so that he could live. And which ultimately we were able to do, and we got those images back, and he's alive, which is awesome. And then another funny story, like, I remember getting the call at 3 a.m. to show up at that data center. I show up there, and I put in, probably 22 hours of hard work that day, and then I did it 180 hours within one pay period, basically. It was just 2 weeks of hell. But we were able to save the hospital, save the organization. Luckily, I knew an old trick using a VMware virtual command line interface to be able to rebuild VMDK files from VMDK flat files that still existed on the storage array and migrate them over to the new storage array. What does all of this mean? It means that had management been more aware of professional compatibility, they wouldn't have put themselves in a situation where they had an echo chamber where they have literally somebody at the highest levels who is making decisions, like the CEO and the CIO. The CIO has a background in finance, yet for some reason I have no idea how he became head of IT, no clue. And these guys didn't know that. Why? Well, guess what? The CEO was an ISTP and the CIO was an ISTJ. They had really high compatibility, but they would enable each other. They would be yes men to each other. And they would bring that yes men environment, that yes men relationship that they had themselves to the board of directors. And it created a very bad, toxic business culture within this hospital because everyone just ended up following the standard of let's just enable everybody instead of actually provide challenge. And then the people that did provide challenge, well, guess what? They were ultimately fired. And it just created this really toxic affiliative business environment for the people at this organization, and we practically lost everything. If it weren't, and I know I'm taking a lot of credit here, but it's true, if it wasn't for me, that hospital would have its doors closed. I saved them. I did. I had a little help from other people, but I was telling those people what to do and dictating the entire saving process to them. And it's so funny because I remember the CIO yelling at me, telling me about how he's going to fire me if I don't get it fixed, and how dare I let this happen, etc. And then 2 weeks later, his replacement, the new CIO, thanked me for saving their butts, which was kind of interesting. Shook my hand and everything. And I made that happen. They did not make that happen, right? So it's just situations like that, those types of emergencies that where if you don't have your own internal psychological corporate culture under control, you're going to have a huge thing. And this is why affiliatives, especially SJs or even NFs, have this problem where they're thinking that every single person can fit one type of corporate or business or job role. And they don't understand anyone. They literally think that there's a one-size-fits-all solution for their own corporate social culture on a regular basis. And in the reality situation, it's not. And then they go out of their way to protect their ego investments, especially when it comes to cognitive projection and hoping people that they put around them are not very challenging, that they make them the most comfortable because compatibility in the workplace, that's all it's all about, compatibility, and it's not really actually going to get anywhere. And it just leads to problems after problems after problems after problems. If I'm going to invest in a company, what I like to do is I like to look at the C-suite of the company and the board of directors if I have their names and actually can find videos about them and psychoanalyze them and actually type them. And if I see a lot of compatibility and not enough camaraderie, then I'm not going to invest in that company. Even worse than that, if I see 50-50 between camaraderie and compatibility, I'm still not going to invest in that company. It's only the company that has more camaraderie than compatibility. That is a company worth investing in, okay? And you have to understand that the most successful businesses out there, the most successful organizations out there, the most successful ventures out there are all made up of people who just naturally don't like each other. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they like each other. Who cares? Because it's all about getting work done. It's all about the higher purpose of the business or the work or the effort itself. It has nothing to do with anyone liking somebody else at all. Everyone is expected when they go into the workplace to put that aside. But no, because we live in this super feminized culture where you have men and women who are not raised with fathers at all. They end up being super entitled and they end up going to work expecting everybody to be compatible with them. And then they end up failing. It's like they're setting themselves up for failure, or their fatherlessness has set themselves up for failure. And because of that entitlement, and it's worse with women due to innate female solipsism, because women they have that solipsistic issue where they are innately more entitled than men are, and innately more selfish than men are over time. They end up causing a huge issue as a result of that, and then they bring that selfishness and entitlement into the workplace, and it absolutely brings everyone else down, kind of like crabs stuck in a bucket, and a crab's trying to get free, and the other crabs pull that other crab down. It's not going to work. But let's look at the male side. The male side is just as bad, because you have masculine idealism there, and you have men who don't go and suffer through a rite of passage, so they're constantly giving too much to the business, or they end up giving too little, right? Because they're very idealistic. But oftentimes it's them giving too much, and they don't know how to establish or enforce their own boundaries, especially with the corporate world that they're in, and especially with potentially entitled women that they are around at the workplace. And then they end up losing out on opportunities for advancement. They end up not missing those promotions. They end up basically serving at the feet of those solipsistic women in the workplace, and they're not able to actually provide channel or challenge, as a result of that situation. That's one of the reasons why I just don't hire people based on a resume. I really don't care. I teach other people to have resumes because that's how the rest of the world works. But I don't hire people based on a resume. I hire based on whether or not I like you or not. And if I don't like you, chances are I'm probably going to hire you because I know you're going to tell me no. For example, the operations manager at CSJ, he is an ISFJ. And he is polar opposite with me. And he tells me no all the time. Thank God. And then, yes, I also have an INTJ who is on my team. He's a systems administrator. He's a fantastic fellow. And he also tells me no at times as well. But sometimes, for example, we were in a meeting recently. And he's like, okay, well, this is going to take like an hour and a half to explain to you, etc. And I know you're going to not like it and say no, etc. He's making those points, and he wanted to schedule another meeting for it. And I'm like, no, dude, just tell me what you're thinking right now. And then 5 minutes later, I was already agreeing with him. But he was not so willing to lend or challenge me. Whereas, the ISFJ challenges me often, but the INTJ doesn't challenge me as often as he can. And I tell him, and I try to demonstrate, by instead of explaining, always demonstrate, don't explicate, that when you're in a work environment, right, I got to demonstrate to him that, yes, I'm really good at taking feedback. I'm not going to pop off and get mad. I'm not insanely invested in this thing. But, then again, this is an INTJ, ENTP relationship where the INTJ has some serious ego investments and stuff that he's talking about or things that he cares about because he's trying to put himself in my shoes because of FI child sympathy. But because it's a child, it ends up creating an FE trickster situation where he is basically assuming that because that the idea that I had in a previous meeting that he was not present at, that I'm really invested in that idea. When the reality of the situation is that I actually have no mental investment in that idea. What I actually care about is doing it right the first time and having the absolute best system in place. Well, guess what? He's an INTJ. He's an amazing strategist. He's very awesome at systems. And all he just needed to say was, no, that's stupid. We shouldn't do it that way because of this. Instead of, saying, well, it could take a long time, trying to make me comfy because SE inferior. No, he just flat out tell me, this is stupid. I remember one time recently in a meeting, he's like, Chase, that is a stupid idea. We shouldn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That is stupid. I don't even know why I went in that direction. Okay, next. You see what I'm saying? I don't care about being embarrassed, in meetings. I don't care about being publicly shamed by my own people in my own meetings. That's fine. Because guess what? I'm not God's gift to business. They got way more business acumen than I do most times, and I really appreciate that they're willing to be open and honest with me. But you can kind of see how the difference is right there between an ISFJ who has high camaraderie versus an INTJ who has highest compatibility. You can kind of see how the INTJ is more prone, or at least predisposed with his proclivities, to enable me in the work in a work environment, whereas the ISFJ is just meh. I'm just going to tell you straight because I just disagree with that. Now, granted, it can take an ISFJ a while to acclimate, to allow themselves or give themselves permission to say those things, but the second they have that permission, they're not going to pull punches, right? Whereas the INTJ knows they already have permission, but they are pulling punches. You see what I'm saying? So this is just, some anecdotal evidence of how, the CSJ team itself for csjoseph.life kind of behaves to give you an idea of some of these personality and psychological dynamics that permeate business on a regular basis. And no one's even aware of this. No one's aware that this is a thing. And it's really sad. It's really sad that that's the case, that a lot of people aren't, doing this. But again, the reason why is that people don't have their fathers in their home, so that when they join the workforce, they expect to find and would prefer to work with people who have high compatibility with them, which will ultimately lead to the psychological failure of your project and ultimately your business down the road. No, you are better off hiring people that you don't like. Just like Steve Jobs said. Steve Jobs says, we don't hire people that tell them what to do. We hire people so that they tell us what to do. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly it. I hire people to tell me what to do. That's awesome, okay? And that's what is absolutely necessary for the success of an organization. And just that from Steve Jobs is a real example of camaraderie or business camaraderie. So, but let's talk about this in more of a professional compatibility type of thing. And it's because you're like, wait a minute, C.S. Joseph, you've been talking about how bad or potentially bad compatibility is within an organization. So now you're talking about professional compatibility and how it's a good thing. The message doesn't make sense here. This is like completely off. I will admit that the nomenclature is actually pretty confusing. Okay, I'll admit that. I'll take full responsibility for that. But that's kind of not the direction I mean. So what kind of relationships should you at least start with? Or what relationships with people should you seek the most in a professional setting? Obviously, it's really important to start and to prioritize camaraderie, but that's not to say that compatibility does not have its place, okay? And compatibility, what its advantages are ultimately within an organization, really centers around communication and decision-making. It's not really around brainstorming and ideas, because brainstorming and ideas, you can end up creating a perception echo chamber where it's nice to have decision making kind of all on the same track and having organizing on the same track, because that really allows people to send and receive ideas even though their perceptions are just completely wrong about something, which can be a huge advantage, a huge advantage. Now, granted, if you're going to look at sexual relationships, sexuality is mostly within perception functions. Decision-making is just kind of like left out of it. Decision-making doesn't matter. If you have sexual compatibility, if you're an SE user with an SI user, you can have great sex. Congratulations. Go get it on. But if you bring that into a workplace environment, well, you're not going to be able to do that much. You're not actually going to be able to accomplish as much, and you're not going to be able to move forward, because you can end up in situations where you're stuck brainstorming too much and not actually able to execute on anything. You're doing so much concept and design that you actually never get to the development phase. You're actually doing something and putting fingers to keys. It's not going to happen because of that high amount of enablement. And in the past, I had an INTJ co-host on the live streams that I would do on YouTube, and honestly, he would enable me a lot, and I would enable him, and it just absolutely harmed my relationship with him. It also harmed the business in a big way, and I regret doing it. I need to have stronger relationships with people that see things similarly to me, but it's completely different at the same time. So, like, perception functions, in terms of professional compatibility, need to have a more camaraderie approach, an asynchronous approach. Whereas decision making, for the sake of communication, because of how valuable communication is in the workplace, I would say that should be more compatible. So what does this mean? Let's give a few examples. What is highest professional compatibility for an ENTJ? Okay, well, the answer would be an ISTP. So let's discuss why. The reason why is because you still have that TI hero to TE hero compatibility, but you have no such compatibility with the perception functions. They retain their own perception functions. And let me tell you, folks, in the workplace, it's more valuable to have asynchronous perception functions and synchronous decision-making or judging functions in almost every single case. Second highest compatibility with an ENTJ for professional compatibility would be an ESTP. And oh my gosh, it's funny because it's like what I would call that, like, it's almost the professional pedagogue as it is the ESTP, because the ESTP is absolutely not going to put up with the ENTJ's bullshit. The ESTP will expose the ENTJ regardless of what their position or authority is, no matter what. Have that exposing that will cause the ENTJ to grow and be an even better ENTJ. The ISTP, however, probably wouldn't do that because of extroverted feeling inferior, being afraid of how the ESTJ or the ENTJ is going to react with FI inferior. Okay, fair enough. But the ESTP is not going to do that with FE child because they have TI parent. The ESTP is just going to let it fly. But those two have the highest professional compatibility as a result. And the professional compatibility is super, super important there. Because again, the decision-making functions, they're compatible, they are synchronous. They are, if you're dealing with a hero, then you want another hero of the opposite function, but still, like the same, is it an F function or a T function, or you want the parent version of that. So an ENTJ, or that would want to keep the people that they'd want closest to them, absolutely would have to be STPs. Same thing with an INTJ, except the INTJ, it would be the ESTP as highest compatibility with the INTJ, and the ISTP with second highest compatibility, basically. So this is the highest area, in terms of professional compatibility that you can have within an organization. It's bloody fantastic. If you think about it, it's absolutely bloody fantastic. But again, the decision-making functions, if they line up synchronously via compatibility, you're able to facilitate that communication, because communication is absolutely needed, within an organization. Well, guess what, folks? This is no different than the military. Most military people believe that let's just stack it up full of SJs, and then those SJs are just people who follow orders. But the reality situation is you want people in leadership that don't necessarily follow orders. They know when to bend rules in certain situations. STPs do that, they're pragmatic. NTJs do that, they're pragmatic, for example. Pragmatic types, I've noticed, either absolutely are shunned within the military or they're celebrated within the military. It's either or. It's always extremes, And I've seen many pragmatic types oftentimes getting promoted, and then there's the pragmatic types that can follow orders. Oh wait, that's the NTPs. And that's why NTPs often get promoted the fastest that I've noticed within the military. Not those, oligarchical, old boys club ESTJs. They usually just end up in middle management and don't go any further, right? And that can also be a serious issue. But the bottom line is that, like, if we're going to look at ENTJ, ISTP for an example, because we were using that as an example, the ISTP is not going to put up with the ENTJ's performance bullshit or the ENTJ's impulsiveness. Likewise, the ENTJ is not going to put up with the ISTP's need to be perfect and go out of their way to give the absolute best teaching experience, etc., because it's completely irrelevant to the ENTJ. The ENTJ is already an ENJ. It's a teaching type itself. They want to teach people in the system that they have built, whereas the ISTP is an ENJ with its subconscious, and it's trying to teach people, etc., and try to go in that direction. Well, that's not going to be always valuable, right? So there's some give and take, and both of them are able to teach lessons to each other that will actually make each other stronger, as long as they have the ability to maintain mutual respect. See, that's the key. Maintaining mutual respect within the workplace. That's everything. That is the bottom line. That is the most important aspect of professional compatibility, because you're already inviting potential conflict by having incompatible perception functions. But at least you can communicate, and you can communicate your different perceptions. This is absolutely necessary. The fact that they have the same perception functions, that they can look at a thing like a project or a task, and they can arrive to similar conclusions, but it's not the same. It's always a different perspective, and that creates challenge. It's not accepted by default. It's challenged by default. And this allows them to refine their perceptions, which causes them to potentially see risks coming. Oh crap, there's a train coming. I should probably get out of the way. Whereas that's not really as likely to happen if the perception functions are actually compatible, because there's the super high risk. You can almost assume it's going to happen that the compatible perception functions in a professional workplace setting are going to be so enabled that they don't even see the train coming, and they're going to get hit by the train. It's literally the emperor's new clothes. That's what it is. This is why compatibility is such a high risk in the workplace, because it literally creates situations or echo chambers that lead to emperor's new clothes outcomes, basically. And it could still be a problem. So I'm talking about a military setting, Elliot. That's a completely different environment. where you have absolutely no freedom whatsoever. At least you can choose to leave Amazon, but you can't choose to leave the military. There's jail involved with that, going AWOL, etc. So please consider that. There's also loss of rights and other huge consequences. So I kind of disagree with that Trunks Obsessed. I think ESTJs probably perpetuate the old boys club more. The ISTJ just wants their own old boys club. They don't care about the general old boys club, whereas the ESTJ cares more about the general old boys club in general. So it's a little bit different. It's like Dominic Toretto and how he's all about family. That's his individual ISTJ old boys club for himself, etc. Okay. That's where that comes into play. So the bottom line is, you guys just got to understand, professional compatibility is super, super important. Now, granted, that's not to say that you can't go out there and hire people on asynchronicity alone and fill your ranks of people that are in your same quadra to be on your team. Absolutely, you should do that. And yes, it will create an insane amount of conflict, but both of you or anyone that's within your same quadra, it will create a lot of conflict, but it will make all of you sharper. Again, as long as you can adhere to having that level of mutual respect where you agree collectively within your quadra, for example, within your team in the business that, whatever's said is said, I'm not going to take it to the bank, I'm not going to take it personally. And that right there is the number one lesson about professional compatibility. You have to train your people to not take things personally. Because in the workplace, you cannot afford to not have workplace conflict. If you have no conflict, you are running your business wrong. You are getting rid of innovation. You are creating enabling. You are losing productivity. That is horrible. You're literally creating codependent workers who may even become codependent with your organization, and they're stuck in the doldrums. You want to make it more interesting and fun for your workers? Then put people around them that they're not compatible with. Create conflict. And as long as no one's taking it personally, that conflict will make them better. It'll grow them rapidly. They'll gain more skills. They'll be far more capable tomorrow. It's super crucial. It's super necessary. So, and again, that's not to say that you shouldn't have compatible people. Sometimes you just need a shoulder to cry on. But make sure it's one shoulder, not your entire department, okay? And furthermore, do you really want to be in a situation where, everyone in your department's compatible with you, but no one else is within your department who they work with on the day-to-day is compatible with each other? This is why some compatibility is necessary within a professional setting, and it's got to be with the communication. And the communication is best done through the decision-making functions. Perception functions, that's like body language, more so than actual language, right? And that's not going to be as valuable if you're in an emergency situation in the workplace and you got to get an order filled, or you're trying to figure out why the truck hasn't shown up. Maybe you just need a second pair of eyes to actually double check, the system that you're following and looking at your checklist, etc., to make sure you didn't miss anything. Well, somebody who is compatible with you with their perception functions, they're more likely to jump to conclusions and miss the same thing you missed. But if you have somebody else who has camaraderie and the same perception functions of you, they'll go through their own system, but that's similar enough that they'll actually are more likely to catch the problem ahead of time. Why wouldn't you want that in your business? Why wouldn't you want that in your team? Now, ultimately, this is where people start making the argument, okay, Mr. C.S. Joseph, well, what about psychological workplace diversity? Yeah, sure. Have psychological workplace diversity. That's important. But if you're going to read a book by Dave Ramsey called EntreLeadership, which tells you how or teaches you how to set up the proper model when it comes to the type of model in terms of what's your organizational structure in terms of, okay, well, who's the leaders, what's their titles, who's under those people, what do the departments look like, etc. I mean, that's nice, but honestly, if you're just running a flat model where you just have one decision maker, the founder, and then just have a flat model of a bunch of people and maybe even flat models under that, etc., and just do flat model by flat model, that's more efficient. Because at that time, you're not allowing any echo chambers to create. And yeah, your organizational structure matters, but guaranteed, if you have too many people who are compatible, guess what? Guess what? The echo chamber is going to come and people are going to start failing. Productivity is going to go down. By having challenge and conflict, it creates competition. Camaraderie means competition. And competition increases the quality of worker. It's really important. Competition for the attaboy, for example. Competition for doing really well on a project. Competition for a promotion. Competition is a very healthy thing. It's kind of like with women, they need to know that they are competing for your attention if you're an SI user, or they need to know that they're competing for your passion or what you want as an NI user man. And the more they compete, and they compete with other women for your attention or your passion, the higher quality woman they become. Because they have that built-in competition anxiety. You need to leverage that anxiety consistently so that they become better women for you, and you can have better relationships with those women. And it doesn't matter if they're looking for your attention or if they're looking for your passion. It doesn't matter. They compete. Women naturally compete with one another. But if you're having just this, compatible, enabling environment in the workplace, there's no competition. There's no competition at all, and thus no one is growing. You can actually see how this plays out in a political arena too, because if you live in a socialist nation, if you live in a communist nation, for example, there's absolutely no innovation because there's no economic competition. Because competition breeds innovation. If you don't have competition, there's no need to innovate. Because I'm the DMV, I'm the Department of Motor Vehicles, but I'm the only group out there. I have a monopoly on giving people driving licenses. And since no one else can deliver a better driver's license than me, then there's no reason I should innovate my driver's license. There's no reason I should just have people stand in line for 4 hours. I don't have to create an online system. I don't have to innovate. Innovation takes so much longer, or it never even occurs in those environments. You have to have conflict. You have to have competition because that leads to innovation. Innovation in terms of communication, innovation in terms of projects, innovation in terms of new ideas and systems and processes, innovation in getting deals and always getting the absolute best deal and keeping track of new metrics, etc. It creates an environment of continuous improvement, aka Kanban, aka Kaizen, as people say. The Toyota 5S system, which is continuous improvement. You're not going to have continuous improvement in a compatibility-based workplace environment. It doesn't happen. So it's super important. There's so much value to camaraderie, especially in the workplace. I think it's even more valuable than relationships. Now, there are people out there, most people, who get beat down by people who have high camaraderie with them because those are the people that they accuse that are bullies, etc. And that's why they want to be in sexual relationships with people who have the highest compatibility, be it gold, silver, or bronze pairs. Anyway. But do you guys see what I'm saying? Do you guys understand what I'm trying to convey here and how important professional compatibility is? Leave the perceptional compatibility at the door, okay? Just leave it there. Focus on filling more people who would disagree with you and tell you what to do instead of you telling them what to do. Really, camaraderie is all about causing you to become the student and not the master. And even if you're a supervisor or a manager or a director or a vice president or a C-suite or the president of the mother effing company, the reality of the situation is you need to become the student. Because the higher position you are, the less value you actually have, ultimately. You are a servant. Everyone else beneath you at your organization is technically above you. You are there to serve them because you don't have a choice, because without them, nothing happens at that organization. And the only way you're going to be able to have success is if you are making sure that you are the student and not the teacher. And the best way to be the student is camaraderie. This is why we have the cutting edge episode where we talk about the ultimate study technique. You want to learn from the type you have the highest camaraderie with for you to grow the fastest. And guess what? That's your own type. You want to terrify yourself within your organization that you're in, or your team, or your department, or your business? Hire someone of your own type. That'll really screw with you, right? Most people don't have the guts to do it, and most people don't even do it because they just can't stand being repulsed by being reminded of how they used to behave when they were much younger, for example, okay? So remember, be the teacher, not the student. Professional compatibility. Emphasize compatibility for decision-making and communication, but avoid compatibility at all costs with perception functions. That's for the bedroom. That's for close friends, folks. It's not for work. It's not for business. It really isn't. Sure, you can have a few compatible people in there every now and then, but the reality of the situation is, if you don't stack your cards of your team with more camaraderie than compatibility, you are setting yourself and your business up for failure in the future. Mark my words. Mark my words. Furthermore, if you're a business owner, you're less likely to get screwed by people who have high camaraderie than by people who have high compatibility, because friends hurt friends the most, right? Keep that in mind. This is where it's also, don't hire your friends, don't hire your family. That's where those adages come from. It's from these psychological truths. That's where that comes from. So, all right, well, that's it for this episode of Cutting Edge, July 2021, and now I'd like to open up for a Q&A. So does anyone have any questions relating to the contents of this lecture this evening? Parent equals more responsible, better results from use. Yeah, technically that's true. Trace, can you name the other professional pairs, please? I will, but I'll be naming them in a subsequent lecture series with all of them. I'm not going to be going through the entire list today. Think of this as a preview or a sneak peek for what's to come. I'm not going to be going into more use on that. Elliot asks, are pedagogue relationships that force each other to use their critics more beneficial pedagogues that force nemesis use? It really depends if the person is shadow focused or if they are subconscious focused. If they're shadow focused, forcing to use their critics would not be as beneficial as maybe the nemesis, because the nemesis, through the battleground of inhibition, can actually put a little bit of pressure onto the inferior function, which would help develop it a little bit more. Although that's not really say, that's just more to identify an area of improvement. They'll still have to use cognitive orbit or cognitive axis to kind of fix that, or to adjust to the inferior function as a result. What would an ISTJ work camaraderie relationship look like? Just imagine two Dominic Torettos trying to do a race at the same time. Who would win? It would be an insane amount of conflict. That's why there has to be a predetermined, agreed role of I'm the supervisor, you're not, or I'm the master and you're the student. There has to be some kind of hierarchy when you're putting two people of the same type. Otherwise, it'll just turn into absolute conflict. This is where the affiliative comes in to challenge the pragmatic in some cases, because it's necessary to have the affiliative to put two people of the same type in some kind of hierarchy, because if there is no hierarchy, then that's just going to explode in your face, and you just have a ticking time bomb within your organization right there. That's an excellent question. Because you name the other pairs for us, TI tricksters, it will take me a while to figure out. So if you're an ENFP, then you're going to want an ISFJ. If you're an ESFP, then you're going to want an INFJ, for example, etc. Since intuitives, Lorenzo says, since intuitives like intuitives, would a subconscious-focused ENFP still work with a subconscious-focused ENTP in a business setting? Nah, that's hard. That's really hard to say. I'm going to have to say no. I'm really going to have to say no, because I actually was in an organization that had two ENPs running it, and it absolutely, utterly failed. And I don't recommend that, and mostly it's because they didn't have a hierarchy, and even if there was a hierarchy, they wouldn't respect each other enough to respect that hierarchy, and that was really difficult. So I'm going to have to say no. I'm sure it's possible, but there's just so many better people out there to have a business partner relationship with, and I don't recommend that. I don't recommend it at all. Okay, Robbie Barasa says, I used to work with an ENTJ. He drove me crazy. As an ESTP, I didn't expose him. My FE child felt bad for his FI inferior. Should I call him and expose him to make him better? Absolutely you should. ESTPs exist to keep ENTJs honest. Otherwise, ENTJs is just going to turn everyone into their slaves eventually and be this huge slave driver. ESTPs are important to be there to challenge the ENTJ and keep the ENTJ not only honest, but keep the ENTJ good. That way the ENTJ can walk around in confidence knowing that they're always doing the right thing. They don't have to be afraid of feeling bad, which you don't want in the workplace. You don't want an ENTJ feeling unworthy because they're going to take other people down with them. Remember that crabs in the bucket model? That's the same thing. The ESTP being there is actually, by providing additional challenge to the ENTJ, will cause the ENTJ to actually become better such that that never becomes a problem. So yeah, definitely call them out. Definitely hold them accountable. Always. You want to start a business with me, Chase? Yes, Lev. Absolutely. Okay, Trunks Obsessed had a comment. Yes, lots of management meetings turn into a finger-pointing match, and they never make any decisions unless it comes from high up. Yes, expose your boss. Raka says, wouldn't one of the best general compatible relationships as far as friends be ENFP, ESTJ? Can't remember the name of this relationship. Those are conflict types. Be careful with conflict types, but yes, you can grow heavily with conflict types, and I certainly have in certain professional settings. With Trunk says, what would be the best type to throw in the mix with ISTJ management? Okay, so if you have two ISTJs in management, that's a time to actually bring in their compatible type to just kind of set them straight with each other, basically. So an STP would probably be good in that moment if you have two ISTJs, you know, at that moment in that location, or you bring in their conflict type, which would be an INFP. That would be the other option, and give the INFP authority. Oh yeah, that'll be fun. So yeah. Okay. Maggie H says, can you expound upon what you were saying about Elliot's question? Are pedagogue relationships which force each other to use their critics more beneficial than pedagogues that force nemesis use? So if a pedagogue is subconscious focused, they need to develop their critic more. So being in a pedagogue relationship that puts more emphasis on their own critic function will help them develop. And that's where that would be. In terms of the nemesis, it's not really that important. But with the nemesis developing through cognitive axis, that would make their demon pipe up more, which would help develop their inferior function more. It's just a longer process to develop the subconscious. It's not as well of a direct process to develop the subconscious. So there is benefit there, but it's not as much in terms of doing, like, you know, the critic and them being subconscious focused in that value. So hopefully that made sense. Robert Poss asks, what would be the best way to protect against echo chambers with so many TI or TE users? Well, the fact that they, in some cases, you can introduce decision-making camaraderie, but then you're going to need to have people with compatible decision-making functions around them or judging functions around them to actually translate what that person is saying. Because people will get so focused on being offended instead of actually communicating to get the job done, and that can also be a huge problem, right? So you can protect against echo chambers in that regard, but like it's really more so about the you can just add more camaraderie types or put people in the same quadra as the decision maker as well. That can also help. But that's not to say you shouldn't have compatible people present. You still need compatible people there from time to time, but just not as much as camaraderie. You want to have like 2/3 camaraderie set up in terms of functions around you, and 1/3 of them compatible, I would say, would be ideal for a workplace situation. AS. So cognitive asynchronicity is good for making progress. It's good for learning and growing, I would say. But synchronicity is good for enjoying that progress. Yeah, definitely. It is more about enjoyment, resting on your laurels, having fun in life, right? Whereas asynchronicity is all about building and growth and moving forward and putting work in, right? You want to, it's like compatibility is for playmates, and asynchronicity or camaraderie is for students and teachers, basically, because it's all about teaching. All right, cool. Poor INFP, haha. Any INFP want to work with me? Trunks asks, would an INFP focused ENFJ work for an ESTP focused INFJ. If you have those, now there's still some enabling that could be there. Just remember, you can have that bronze pair there. You can have that. You can have that bronze pair. Just make sure there's other high camaraderie people around the ESTP or the INFP present to make that work. Okay, so, all right, folks, that's it for the questions. And thank you much for watching this month's episode of Cutting Edge, Introduction to Professional Compatibility. I hope you enjoyed this this recording and this lecture, etc. And I'll see you guys next month on our next episode for the Cutting Edge. So with that being said, folks, see you guys tonight. Later.